Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, February 7th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feast and Marian meditations. So today, we start off with the image of Our Lady of Grace in the Abbey of Saint-Sauve in Montreal-sur-Mer. So, among the many different miraculous images, there's one in the Church of the Carmelites in Vienna, entitled Mary, the Mother of Grace, or Our Lady of Grace, also known as Our Lady of the Bowed Head. And it has this name because in 1610, a Carmelite, Dominic of Jesus Mary, found among the different things in the old Orthodox Church this image of an oil painting of the Mother of God, dust covered and looked somewhat torn, right? So, taking it into his hands, he shook off the dust and knelt down to venerate it with great devotion, right? He had the picture kind of cleaned up. He put it on a shelf in his cell, where he made it the object of his devotion. Now, one night, while he was praying fervently before the picture, he noticed some dust had settled on it. So he had his old woolen handkerchief, and he dusted it off and apologized to Our Lady. And to his great surprise, the face of the Mother of God appeared to take on life. And smiling sweetly at him, she bowed her head, which thereafter remained inclined. Right? So Dominic was worried that he had misseen it, but Our Lady assured him that his requests would be heard. Right? He could ask for them and not to worry. Right? And then Dominic begged that all who venerated Mary in that image might obtain what they requested. In reply, the Virgin gave him this assurance: all who devoutly venerate me in this picture and take refuge to me will have their request granted, and I will obtain from them many graces. But especially will I hear their prayers for the relief and deliverance of the souls in purgatory. Right? So after the death of Dominic, the original painting was lent to Prince Maximilian of Bavaria. He gave it to the Discalced Carmelite in Munich in 1631. They gave it to the Emperor Ferdinand II of Austria and his wife Eleanor. And then after Ferdinand's death, Eleanor entered the Carmelite convent in Vienna and took the picture with her. Right? And so then it kind of went back and forth to different places. Today it's in the Monastery Church of Vienna. On September 27th, 1931, it was solemnly crowned by Pope Pius XI. Its 300th anniversary of arrival in Vienna. Next, we're going to jump down to Italy, and we recall that in 1783 there were a great number of earthquakes in the first days of February. This in Calabria, right? So, one celebration we have is the Madonna del Rosario in Soriano, Calabro, Bibo Valentia, Calabria, in Italy. Right? So it was a very big earthquake in the first days of February in 1783. They said that it radically changed not only the face of the territory, but the very identity and conscience of the Calabrian people. Right? So, but oftentimes these people show their devotion and thanksgiving to Our Lady who had protected them. Right? So one of these expressions takes place in Soriano, Calabro, the epicenter of one of the strongest seismic shocks. Right? It was a 6.5 on the Mercalli scale. I don't know if that's like the Richter scale or what, but anyways, it was big. And so it destroyed a number of the convent complexes, but this miraculous painting of St. Dominic and an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary of the Holy Rosary were found intact, right? So that was very important for them. And not only that, even earlier, they had experience with Our Lady and the Rosary, right? Because in 1638 and 1659 in Soriano, they noticed that these people who were very devoted to the Blessed Virgin of the Rosary, they noticed that those particular towns had less catastrophic effects of the earthquake, right? So this is, for them, it's a very important celebration. Same thing, or similar thing, goes to in Conflenti, in Catanzaro, in Calabria, Italy. They celebrate Maria Santissima delle Grazie della Quercia di Visora, which is the Most Holy Mary of the Graces of the Oak of Visora, right? And again, we remember that this is because of these huge earthquakes that took place in 1783, which took place in these first days of February, right? So what happened? Well, again, it was on February 7th, they had this huge earthquake. And so on this night of terror, the people of Conflenti left their homes and went to the shrine of Our Lady, asking her for help. They had a procession through the streets, invoking the protection of Maria Santissima di Visora. And almost at the end, a very strong shock was felt. There was no damage, though, just a lot of fear, right? So when they started hearing the news of what happened in neighboring towns, though, they were very, very grateful because they said, no, this is a miracle. We've been saved. And so, for this reason, every year they have a procession of the statue of Our Lady on February 7th, and they fast on bread and water. Since 1997, that is, the Madonna della Quercia di Visora has been the patroness of Conflenti, right? So still today, there's the traditional procession. If we go a little bit further in Italy to Santissima Maria Vergine della Porta, which would be like Most Holy Virgin Mary of the Gate or the Door, in Guastalla, Reggio Emilia, Emilia-Romagna, Italy, the feast commemorates the miraculous healing in 1693 of an injured blind man who was praying before the image, right? So the first miracle that we have, the one that really began the devotion to the faithful, took place on February 7th, 1693. Right? Now we have to understand a little bit about the history. So it's a small image of Our Lady was painted on the wall, like in like the wall of the door of this place, right? On the right side for people exiting. So they say the image dates back to 1646 or maybe 1624. They don't really know, right? It was sort of it must have been at the barracks, because it says that there's a lot of, it was ordered first off by the sergeant of the guards, and then unfortunately, like a lot of different patrol groups came through. And so it sort of like just kind of it became a place where people threw their trash, and nobody really took it seriously. There were fires lit by the guards at night, so the image became black. And so at a certain time, a certain Giambattista Zagni, who remembered it because he had actually spent some time in the guardhouse, every so often he would go there. He was an older man, but he would try to clean it up and, do the best he could. So the walls of the city were entirely destroyed by Spanish troops, but it was only that gate that was left, that door, right? Probably because it had like a certain elegance to it. So what happened? Well, he became very old and weak and in sight, right? And so on a cold winter's evening, towards the end of January 1693, as he left the city to go towards his home, probably due to his eye problems, it was icy, he suddenly collapsed in a very deep ditch. So this poor old man suffered bruises. And also, he had some big problems with his eyes. So what happened? Well, because he was really devoted to Our Lady, he bought a candle and asked his friend, who worked not far from there, to light it in front of the image, right? And so he did. The friend went very nicely and lit the candle. And Zagni immediately not only recovered from the after effects of his accident, but also he recovered his sight. So obviously they'd become quite famous because of that miracle. And many people started going there. For instance, his friend, who had brought the candle there, went and lit a candle to ask for grace of the two children who had been suffering and sick. And, they were completely healed. So another man, Domenico Bertarelli, was so crippled that he couldn't stand on his legs, and he had to drag himself on his hands and knees. When he learned of these events, he decided to go there. So Sunday, February 8th, 1693, they took him by cart to the gate, right? So people had come to venerate the image. And so the man had been, he prayed and dragged himself on all fours to the image. After a few moments, he stood up and started walking, right? Perfectly healed, right? There's many of these different things, many examples of miracles found there, right? So that is what we're celebrating today in the Marian world, February 7th. For today's reading from the Imitation of Mary, we continue with Book 2, from Jesus' birth to his death, that is, considering Mary's virtues. And in this text by Alexander de Rouville, we'll read chapter 17, The Faithful Man Should Not Be Discouraged in Desolation and Dryness. At times, God treats the upright man in a way that disturbs and alarms him. He wants to test his fidelity, and therefore deprives him for a while of his sensible presence. This is how Jesus acted towards his Holy Mother. He had foreseen the anxiety his absence would cause, yet he left her for a while, and, unknown to her, remained in the temple. Christian soul, if it pleases this God of love to test you in the same way, be not dismayed. Arm yourself with courage and wait patiently for his return. He is always near to help you when you ask for his help, but it is good that he should pretend at times to depart from you, so that you may realize how unfortunate you would be if you really lost him. When he favors a person with consolations, it is in order to strengthen him in his trials. When he permits him to be left in dryness and desolation, it is in order that he may not grow proud of the goodness God shows him. All or almost all his friends have experienced such alternations of joy and sorrow, consolation and dryness, peace and temptation. When God seems to depart from them and abandon them to themselves, they felt all their weakness. But they did not lose heart, for they knew that his presence is not always sensibly felt, and because they were sure he would help them. They knew that God foresees the difficulties we must endure, and that he has given us the means of drawing profit from them. When his grace was sustaining you in sweetness and consolation, you advanced with pleasure and ease. Yet you made greater progress in virtue when you experience dryness and bear with patience, humility, and submission the state of abandonment in which God seems to have left you. This state is indeed one of sadness, for we fear it is more of a punishment than a test. But Christian soul, when you find yourself in it, do not lose confidence. Hope always, hope firmly, and the trial will not be for long, any more than it was for Mary. Imitate the solicitude of this divine mother as she searched for her son. Seek him as she did, with a holy desire and a holy impatience to find him. Never complain, for Jesus owes you nothing, and if you must lament, let it be a lament of love, like Mary's. Son, she said, why have you done this to us? You see that your father and I have been searching for you in sorrow. That's Luke 2:48. Tell him simply, my Jesus, why have you put me to such a hard test? You know how I suffer from your absence. Is it some infidelity of mine that has merited your departing so far from me? If I have deserved it by actions that displeased you, pardon me, Lord. Henceforth I shall be more attentive to avoid anything that can displease you. But whatever be your reason for acting this way toward me, I accept the trial as you wish me to accept it, and for as long as you wish, provided that you let me always keep love of you in my heart.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our Marian podcast. As St. John Paul II teaches us, from Mary we learn to love Christ, her Son, the Son of God. Through her intercession, may we grow ever closer to him. We encourage you to share this with a loved one or friend and help spread our devotion to Mary. Thank you, and God bless.